Hiya. So our talk is going to be a little bit random because Ruth's feeling a little bit wobbly, and so because she had a big sort of tumble just now down in Malibu, so she's asked me to do it. So normally she'd be talking and I'd just be like gesticulating, but this time it's going to be me talking that you're going to have to listen to. So I'm sorry about that. So I'm just going to just jump out of this for a second because I realised I didn't actually do it like this, and I'm just going to reset the whole thing up. Use a separate display. That's better. And I'm going to go to here. And then we're going to get to here. So I'll just start the talk. Hi, I'm Ruth Gibson, and this is Bruno Martelli. I'm a dance artist, and Bruno is a visual artist. We work together as Gibson Martelli. And just like to say thanks for you guys and Jane and Kate for inviting us. So my arts practice draws on Skinner releasing dance technique, which is a pioneering approach to dance, movement, and the creative process that has evolved from the simple principle that when we are releasing physical tension, we can move with greater freedom, power, and articulation. Through the use of imagery, often drawn from nature, specific somatic processes of releasing and self-exploration take place that facilitate the imagination. And so the practice that we share focuses on the interaction between figures and landscape. These landscapes can be digital, and the figure is kind of a guide that sort of leads the viewer into the environment. And so dissolving the separation between the spectator and the spectacle, we use the term viewer, player, user, and performer interchangeably here, and sort of immersion and interactivity is key. And our starting point is the user, and working with performers has given insights on how to embody the digital, blending it with the physical. And we're basically aiming to create mixed reality experiences. And so periodically, the player becomes a performer for other visitors. And it's aiming to escape the conventions of the gallery or the theatre. Technology enables performance to be gifted to the audience, enjoyed in everyday life, for example, held in the palm of the hand. So this is a picture of the Arctic Circle residency. So we're visual artists working on the fringes, and so we're using technology in some funny ways. Sometimes we use tools to subvert ways of engaging with our art beyond the level of expectations for general purpose. For specific investigations to consider how we experience our bodies, meeting virtual worlds. One aim is to highlight physicality, the kinesthetic, and pace. And our artwork, sometimes offer task experiences, but more often than not, emphasize the idea of just being, taking our time, getting lost, meandering, playing and dwelling. And our interfaces that we make for exhibitions in public spaces, our interfaces developed for exhibitions in public spaces such as galleries, art centres, and these are sort of sometimes on display for a couple of months to a year, and some of them have been on tour for 5 years or more. So we're going to show some examples in a minute. And so I think we were talking to some of you today, and one of the things that we do a lot is we draw on artistic residencies just to get out of everyday life or to use specialist tools and to concentrate on a particular project. And the following examples all came out of residencies. So this one, which you can see, this is a picture of the residency, is a sailing trip to the Arctic Circle with Jane, actually, and another residency at the Banff Centre in Canada. And I'll just show a bit of video of the resulting work. So yeah, I'm just gonna jump out of that, and I'm just gonna unskip this slide. I wasn't going to show it to you, but I think I'll unskip it. So unskip it here, and then we're just going to play this one. So that was a virtual reality piece, and we're wondering when we did the residency how it would be possible to kind of portray the kind of sublime sort of wonder of the Arctic, and it seemed like using immersion would be a really good way to go. So I'm not really going to talk about this too much, but basically there was a kind of like a hemp rope, and the virtual reality user used the rope to control a balloon, which itself was a simulation of S.A. Andre's 1897 doomed Arctic polar balloon expedition. And it's just to using the haptics, even the very simple DK1, the early virtual reality headset that we had, it sort of gave you quite an immersive sense. And we worked with another piece in an exhibition called 80 Degrees North, and I'll just show a quick clip. I can't even talk now. A quick clip of that now. Very short clip. Now I'm going to show you this piece. Sorry, that just came to an abrupt end. So this piece is it's called Visitor. Vermilion Lake, and it's from an exhibition we did called Visitor in 2011. And this is when we were beginning to start to experiment with the kind of immersive environments. And based on some experiences we'd had in Canada, we decided to make this a full-scale replica of a trapper's cabin in the gallery. And this is a picture of it. This is a gallery installation view. And the idea was that we wanted to kind of loop around from the physical into the virtual, and we're working with a computer game engine, and to make assets, we made this model of a Canadian cabin, which is based on a real hut in Canada, and then we put it into the computer game engine, and then we took the low resolution, low polygon model and the textures, all the sort of computer game assets that we'd made, and we sort of scaled them up to full scale back again. So this is like this is a full scale kind of version of a low resolution, low polygon model of a real place, and it's just this idea that we try and do in our work, which is kind of looping around and going from the physical world, putting it into the virtual world, and then manipulating it in the virtual world, bringing it back out into the physical world. And so now the sort of haptic interface that you saw there in the video of this kind of rowing boat, where the physical rowing boat is connected to its virtual on-screen half. It required quite a lot of physical effort to move around the kind of simulated lakes. And now we're thinking more about very sort of delicate interfaces. And so we've been working on a kind of breathing interface. And these are all kind of embodied interfaces, which are sort of quiet rather than being sort of task-orientated. And so the interaction we're thinking about now can be quite ambient. So we're going to move on and talk about how we inhabit, move in and around the new spaces that emergent technologies afford, and the new creative practices and models of performance that are emerging. I think I hear Ruth.
Oh,
I can share a little bit of this.
okay.
So we're gonna move on and just talk about that piece, which is called "We Are Here and We Are Everywhere at Once" from 2017. So.
And I don't know whether anybody recognised the landscape, but it's Rohan from Lord of the Rings. So we were going to the South Island of New Zealand to film in motion capture seats, but without being characters and without the landscape being a different, representing something else in a movie. So we were unveiling the kind of mechanics of basically the processes we were doing. So obviously we showed the drone, and so we were doing this idea which runs a lot through our work, which is about camouflage. So we were sort of revealing and hiding and revealing. And so we did, in a way, the shots are sort of slightly the wrong way round in a way, showing you that and then telling you about it rather than showing you the process. So now I'm going to show you a bit of the process. So some of the work that we did in the landscape, we actually went and took the VR headset into the landscape, and we also worked in the lab as well. And I'll just, so the dancers are here in the lab and being fed into VR are different landscapes. Very plain landscapes, a little bit like the first White Island project that you saw, which was the balloon ride, which was very much like Minecraft. So we had 4 different landscapes that we were looking at, but also we had a dance piece as well shown. So we were just looking at how we'd respond to those. And then when we went into the landscape, which is the film you just saw, we tried to encapsulate some of that. We didn't show the film though. So, can I take the sound down a bit?
No, it doesn't work.
So the first film is part of 7, and this is one of the 7. So they're all shown at the same time. So this is shown alongside the drone film. How long is this? 5 minutes. So we're not going to show you all of that film, but these, alongside the 7 films, these were shown about this size portraits in the gallery as well. And of course, they're the view of the facial capture. Head camera, you can talk about the next one.
You want me to talk? Okay.
No, not this one. No, the next one.
So, So we didn't really want to show you just a bunch of work that was already like finished, but we did want to. We really wanted to think about showing you some of the process as well. And so we've really been thinking now about in the motion capture studio, we're tracked and we're mapped through technology, and also on location we're located, surveyed and watched, and our movements are monitored by drones. So when a new technology emerges, kind of the misuse of the systems that are designed to protect us leave us at risk. And Stephen Cook, who's a biology professor at Carleton University in Ottawa, he calls for encryption to secure data and limit the use of telemetry tools. So tagging, for example, makes it easy to find rare creatures in the wild and simple for anyone to find in real time, and giving rise to the kind of cyber poacher. And so there are counter viewpoints to the open data movement or sharing on social media sites, which are kind of emerging. And so we're thinking about the right to wander, the right to stalk, the tracker tracked, and the hunter hunted. And so normally I guess in kind of like high-end movie production, of course, the sort of motion capture performers that we would see would always be replaced digitally by avatars. We'd never actually see the performers. And the sort of the kind of seeing the person with the shiny ping pong ball suit in the motion capture lab, this is the kind of thing that always is left for the kind of DVD extras reel. But we're really interested in actually giving the performers sort of back to themselves and actually showing who they are and who they really are, rather than actually just replacing everything. So just as the sort of landscape of New Zealand basically is always standing in for, let's say, another place, and the performers are always being stood in for by a digital kind of avatar, we're trying to think about like bringing it back around to them again. And so this is why I guess this sort of motion capture project that we've been doing, when we were actually motion capturing people in the lab as well as actually just filming them, kind of ended up being kind of a video project, like this 3-channel video screening, rather than a kind of sort of animation. And so this kind of idea of kind of tracking and sort of technology, it's kind of feeds into the kind of the interest that we've had for a really long time about camouflage. So I'm just going to show some pics from this other project. So camouflage is the theme recurs, and it makes us think about how we can sort of perform encryption. So just to give a bit of background, so we've developed this project called Man-A as a kind of laboratory for exploring a few of the concepts relating to camouflage, mocap, and performance, and also thinking about the idea of gifting and creating a new space for performance. Not a space like a theatre space, but some sort of other space. So artist Norman Wilkinson developed dazzle camouflage in World War I for the Navy, and his idea was that because of the constantly changing light conditions out at sea, a grey colour for warships, it doesn't really hide them. So instead he used a kind of unique high contrast patterns to confuse rangefinders in enemy submarines. And the theory was that the dazzle, this is kind of black and white geometric and sometimes colour patterns, would make it very hard to decipher the direction and also confuse the range. Each pattern was unique, so it would be really difficult to determine what each individual ship was because there would be no consistency. And dazzle camouflage fed back into other artists' work after the war. And this is a video of a commission by the Selfridges department store in 2014. And so we're thinking about this new space of performance. And here, the prints, the sort of dazzle-like prints, are developed from abstract images of moving dancers. The prints, in turn, conceal performances which are activated using a custom mobile app, which reads the augmented reality markers that are in the print. And the idea is to gift the performance to the audience so that they can engage with the work at home later rather than having to come to a specific space, because these prints can all be downloaded at home. And this sort of idea of gifting is one that we've looked at in our work a lot, and also the idea of kind of delivering performance. And also, of course, using motion capture, which, unlike video, it enables a multiple viewpoint and things like non-linearity. And in a way, it's a kind of an attempt by us to escape the proscenium arch of the theatre. But, of course, then we have another dilemma, which immediately the phone creates its own frame. So the natural step is to sort of, for going on from augmented reality, is to make a virtual reality version. So we were asked to be part of the Future of Storytelling Festival in New York, and they wanted to show the virtual reality version of Man-A in their virtual reality theatre. And what they have is they have 50 head-mounted displays so that the audiences can have a simultaneous individual VR experience of a number of works developed for the Gear VR. And this is really strange because one of the main drivers of using technology was so that the audience can escape from the theatre. And VR is a good way of creating an immersive experience. And by using mobile VR, you can just gift it to anybody. It's really, the sort of barrier to entry is very low. And so the initial version we made was for the Google Cardboard. The virtual reality space enables a performance in the round, and it gets away from the proscenium arch. And I guess Brenda Laurel talks about VR being a place that you can visit, not a thing that you look at. Anyway, because of various reasons, we didn't do future storytelling, but later we worked with our frequent collaborator, sound artist Adam Nash, to make audio for each one of the VR scenes. And we made a PC version, which we're going to demo in a minute, but I'll just show you a clip in case you don't come to the demo. It's really short. So this is another work in the same series. And so, like I said, this is like physicalizing the virtual. It's about closing the loop back around again. So taking our performers, making avatars of them, putting them into virtual reality space, and then taking the avatar out and making this, which is a sort of 15-meter-long flat pack cardboard sculpture that we made for the residency we did at Dartmouth College. So this is one of our performers, Bob, and this is his... and the nice thing about this is the endless plasticity of the digital medium. So I think it's Ruth's motion capture is sort of animating Bob's kind of avatar. You can just kind of, there's a way that kind of the bodies kind of meld together. And there's like a little clip of what their thing looked like. So it's an augmented reality sculpture as well. And I think we're also thinking a little bit about simulation and realism. And our experiments are really thinking now about how to strip information away, which leaves room for the imagination. And it's amazing how the brain can sort of discern a moving body using a kind of minimum of information. So in the sort of Manet project overall, there's no shading information to give form to the scenes. There's no lighting. So your brain is having to sort of do the work. And it's kind of the motion that gives the information. And really, I guess it's back to camouflage, disguise. It's really about creating illusions. The idea is the kind of the magic of the theatre, I guess, revealing and hiding. And Yaron Lanier talks about VR as kind of advanced stage magic without the stage. And I think it applies to augmented reality as well. And Ruth wanted me to show you this slide too. So we've had this interest in Dazzle, and obviously, like I said earlier, lots of other artists have been interested in it too. And so Adam Harvey here on the left, and Peter Prokop. Adam Harvey's been experimenting with kind of Dazzle camouflage makeup, which is a way to defeat facial recognition. And Peter has sort of made this app where you can it sort of splats Dazzle onto your face. And I'm going to talk about another project, and I think this is probably going to be very confusing and oblique as well.
Sorry, there's a lot of projects, but we're just sort of piling them on.
415 000 moins 001.0 416 000 moins 001.0 417 000 moins 001.0 418 000 moins 001.0 419 000.
Header, file type HDR, data type HDRS file version 1 num segments 60 num frames 101 data frame rate 30 Euler rotation door
115 000 meno 001.0 116 000 meno 001.0 117 000 meno 001.0 118 000 meno 0.
Okay, so that woke everybody up.
That's really good. We've got like 400 hours of that we can play. So normally we play the whole thing.
We're not joking.
No. So,
We're not joking.
So Jacob Appelbaum provides a succinct description of the cultural context, which is, he says, over the last 40 years, a revolution has swept the planet, happened quietly, and those who noticed were ridiculed at best. It's a revolution where nearly all of our data is devoured in an automated fashion, machine to machine, person to person, voice, text, communications, movements, all life consumed, quantified, searched, and catalogued. So, I guess, what you've just heard, basically, is a recent project that we've been working on called Performing Encryption, which is part of the Living Archives project, and it's a collaboration with our friend and collaborator, Susan Cazell, at Malmö University. And we've been looking at body movement and how it forms both an archive and a trace and a sort of fingerprint and how you can sort of hide it. And the idea is it's not in any way a practical approach to encryption. It's purely conceptual. So everybody knows about facial recognition and how it can be defeated if the subject is facing away from the camera. So for gait recognition, it doesn't really matter which direction the subject is facing because it's just looking at how your walking pattern is. And that can just be the upper half of your body, maybe. But sometimes, some people think it may be defeated by the sort of analog method of just putting a stone in your shoe. So we're thinking about this project as a kind of performative, if you like, intervention into discourses and practices around data privacy and security. So I won't say all that stuff. That's just another big quote. So what we've been doing is recording motion capture files, and alongside our 30-second motion capture files, we're also motion capturing gestures, which are short 1-second sequences from a single marker, which is then dropped down to 30 frames a second. And then we're using this particular file format called HTR. This is like a text base, so you can just edit it on your computer using any kind of text editor. And this is what it looks like. And there's translation and rotation information. So it's basically the first 3 columns is X, Y, Z, coordinates in space of one of the markers, and the second one is the rotation, how much rotation it is. And what we're doing is we're using the 1-second gestures as a symmetric cryptographic key to encipher the motion capture data. So we step through each frame of the gesture to encrypt the motion capture file, and we just use that in a big Excel spreadsheet with a kind of funny formula. Right, it's a really simple way to do it. And so this is kind of before and after, right? So the phrase on the left, it basically gets encrypted and it looks like the phrase on the right afterwards, using that squiggly line as the key. So the performer makes the squiggly line, and then that performer's squiggly line can encrypt and decrypt her motion capture data. And then, of course, because of the kind of people we are, you can put it into VR and it looks really horrible, and it looks kind of like this. And I don't have a video, but it's really bad, and you just don't want to see it. It's a total horrible mess. And so we tried out a bunch of different things, and we're thinking also as well about, because we're working as part of the Living Archive project, and so this book is Susan's encrypted data as a book. It's 30 seconds of movement, which turns into a 670-page book. And the audio you heard was earlier in the kind of computer voice, which is 400 hours long. It's Ruth's 30-second phrase turned into using text-to-speech on the Mac, which actually has a better range of voices. So the 30-second movement becomes 400 hours long, and we're using this vintage analog reel-to-reel machine to record it on, because each tape can hold around 6 hours and 20 minutes of audio. And on the right-hand side, you can see these are the gestures which we got printed as bronze maquettes. So we just got them 3D printed in bronze. And the idea is that you could smuggle the key and maybe the audio or the book around with you, and it's possible for a performer to learn the gesture and to re-perform it, and then this is a way that you could actually decrypt the motion capture. And it's also an exercise in thinking about preserving data, because everybody's like, oh, put it on the cloud, it'll be totally safe. But as soon as you put it on the cloud, the data actually belongs to somebody else. And if they go bankrupt, that's tough, it's all gone. If the servers go down, it's basically all gone. Doesn't matter how many servers they've got, maybe the company gets bought by somebody else. Whereas if you think about a book, I mean, just that book, which we got from Hulu or whatever it was, an online book printer, this is going to be good in a dry environment for 100 years maybe. The tapes, they're already 40 years old. The machine's 40 years old. It's perfectly great. They'll easily last another 40 years. And the bronzes is basically one of the most durable man-made materials that exists, and it should be good in thousands of years. So it's really like, we just think about this because we do a lot of stuff with computers, but once you've got it on the computer, it's pretty much ephemeral. Like performance itself, it's gone because the operating system will upgrade, the USB stick will go down the toilet by mistake, the hard disk, you'll drop it and you'll crack it, it's gone. But these kind of old materials are going to be lasting forever. Then there's a slide now that I don't know what it is. Oh,
that's a surprise.
Right. We're just going to show you like 2 more things really quickly.
These are kind of the last 3 works. These last 3 works are recent works, very recent works, like in the last 5 months or something. So
this piece is called Capture the Flag, and it's a real-time computer simulation, just endless computer simulation. We just plug it into the computer and it just runs. We've been showing it in galleries, and we've been thinking about it's a pure computer error. We've been striving for kind of authenticity and movement that has kind of a weight and a gravity. And the original concept that I was trying to do was create a flag for VR, which is really a kind of way of thinking about a metaphor for the uncontested territory of cyberspace. Because at the moment there's kind of a gold rush going on, but basically this is the unclaimed territory in cyberspace, really in virtual reality, if you like. Not every bit is owned like on Earth. So we're thinking about we should have a flag, maybe a white flag of truce, maybe parley or surrender, and the flag would be interactive so that a VR user could wave it around. It's just kind of conceptual thing. So in order to make the flag behave in a flag-like way, we used a cloth simulation, so the cloth simulates being blown by the wind. And then when it became time to attach the flag to the flagpole, there was a kind of unexpected simulation error, and the flag exhibited this unplanned behavior where it just kind of ran away. And we decided that actually this was possibly the best result that we could hope for, and this is what we ended up doing. And so this is just like a short video clip, and it just basically just goes off into the sunset. But then it will, later on it will come back, and it just goes backwards and forwards.
So in the past, we would have used motion capture from a dancer to dry the cloth, whereas this is a mistake, and it just has this incredible sort of kinesthetic properties, really. It's joyful. It's really amazing.
And I'm just going to show you this, and because we're really terrible. Anyway, we did this project. This is commissioned in China just at the end of last year, and it's called Star Gods and Moon Rabbits, and it's made for the Intangible Cultural Heritage Park in Chengdu. And they wanted to commission. They commissioned a few digital artists to make digital projects which reference China's rich cultural heritage in the Sichuan province specifically. And I really wanted to show you a video, but when we went to China to actually do the install, we got so sick that we didn't actually manage to shoot any video. We got some really terrible video on the phone. It looks like garbage, so we're not going to show it. I'm just going to show you pictures. There's another picture. And basically, this is like, there are two LCD screens, and we're riffing off the Biennale face-changing opera that they have in China, which is where a performer wears a multi-layered mask made of cloth, and they instantly, using an invisible silk thread, it's a really brilliant theatrical trick, can just change the face. So it just changes, the mask comes off, and it's faster than you can see. So our computer, we have these two characters, the left-hand one and the right-hand one. One represents the past and is based on the traditional Chinese masks. The other one is the futuristic, forward-looking one, which is based on things like kind of like Oskar Schlemmer, kind of Bauhaus kind of masks and things like that. And they change colors. And then at the same time, we really wanted to do a surveillance project because it was China, but we have to be really culturally sensitive about that. It wasn't going to happen. So we decided that we wanted the masks to watch people. And so this is why I'm really sad that I don't have a video. And so what happens, there's a kind of like video cameras on top of each one. And then we used a kind of machine learning system to do pedestrian detection and tracking, so that when people walk past, the masks, which are initially asleep, they kind of like wake up and then they start like basically watching people, and it's a very kind of subtle kind of ambient kind of interaction. And we thought this is quite anyway, the Chinese, they loved it, and and it's all fine, and we managed to get past it. But it was just really interesting because when we were developing the kind of machine learning part of the project, which was doing the pedestrian detection and tracking, it was just really freaky how freaky just us, like rubbish kind of artists that didn't know anything about it because we hadn't done any machine learning stuff before, how that we could just get stuff off of the internet and cobble some code and get some GitHub repos and just put it all together. And we work with a colleague from Goldsmiths University, and it's like amazing how good it is at tracking people and how many kinds of objects it can recognize and how incredibly accurate it is. And this is just like the civilian, like we didn't spend too much, because we only had a couple of weeks to put this together. It was actually really frightening, and we kind of freaked ourselves out because this machine learning system was so good at recognizing stuff. It would dogs, cats, horses, people, bicycle, bananas, laptops. It would just it had 60 things it could just recognize instantaneously, and it was really scary accurate, just from a terrible low-res video feed. And then the project that we're going to show demo in the I forget where we're going, Genesis. In a minute is, this is just kind of an experimental VR piece. So we've been thinking about performance, and all of our work is really about just thinking about different ways of presenting and recording and encoding and displaying performance and disseminating it. And so Ruth has been using a 3D drawing package to draw, but because she's tricky, she was drawing with her feet. And then we're thinking about a kind of drawing practice, because I guess a drawing is a kind of way of taking three-dimensional space and collapsing it into two-dimensional space, and then you sort of see it on the sort of picture plane. But actually, it's come from 3D. And then this is, with the 3D drawing package, actually the three-dimensionality kind of remains, but also if you think about it, the VR systems like the hand controllers, effectively, it's a motion capture system because it's actually tracking your hands. And so with motion capture, what happens is a point in space is kind of like moving, but with the drawing package, the point in space is based over time, so it actually becomes a line. And so these kind of wiggly shapes are all drawings that she did with her feet that we turn into a kind of virtual environment that you can kind of kind of experience. And we're at the moment just thinking about different ways that we can sort of kind of realize this. And there's like another couple of pictures. And yeah, so, and like I mentioned earlier, we're going away from the kind of task-orientated interfaces because, of course, the virtual reality controller has been developed for, really, it comes from kind of gaming kind of culture, so they very much resemble game controllers. They have like a lot of buttons, little joysticks, and it's all about pressing buttons and doing stuff with your hands. And this is why we're thinking about we need to get maybe into a sort of embodied kind of interface, which is maybe more subtle, which is why we're thinking about using this with our kind of breathing interface that we've been sort of developing. And I guess we could talk about that more, if you want, in the questions, which is going to be now.
So we have about 20 minutes for Q&A, and if you could wait for the microphone, that would be helpful because we're recording the talk. So anyone have a question?
Hi, I'm curious, you talked a little bit about how you're stripping away a lot of elements and it's sort of minimalist in that you're not conveying all the information, it's just sort of the basic shapes and form of the body with motion capture. So I'm curious if there's anything that you had to unlearn or relearn in terms of what's in your dance toolbox that you had to change the way you approached the movement, and any opportunities for new modes of expression.
The answer to your question is yes. Had to. I think it's really interesting. The practice that I do is Skinner releasing technique, which is was devised in the 1960s by Joan Skinner, who actually is still alive in her mid-90s, and she lives in Seattle. One of the things that Skinner releasing does, in fact, is it makes you take risks and unlearn, and a lot of dancers actually find it really difficult to unlearn. One of the tasks for the Manet project, which was the black and white one, I got 17 dancers to work with me in the lab, and they came to the lab and they improvised. And that's a really, really tricky thing to do with motion capture, because motion capture you have to face a certain way, you have to repeat phrases, and you have to articulate. Everything has to be like a pipeline, like a games or a film, a movie, restricted time. So I had to learn lots of different things to bring those two practices together. So yeah, the quicker answer is to say, yeah, I did have to unlearn. But I think giving some crits today with students here, I think it's difficult these days to actually think about what risk-taking is. And I think you've got to fail to move on. And I really, just keep working, keep finding new ways, new angles. The dancers that I worked with had never worked in that situation before. They had to wear a suit. They had to, but they started to think about the suit as a partner, or the space as a partner. They thought about space in a completely different way. Even the trajectories I don't know whether you're familiar with a motion capture studio, but ordinarily in a movie, you'd have, many, many cameras all around you and retroreflective, and basically there's a pipeline where you have a skeleton and a model and so on. But just those trajectories, the rays, from the camera to the marker set, was really interesting for the dancers to see, because it was like a huge cat's cradle in the space. So they could sort of understand multi-directional balance and alignment just with seeing something that was inherent in the software. So it's working with other disciplines is always really helpful to push dance practice. I could go on and on and on and on about that. but I won't. Any more questions?
I was curious to see what combinations of software and hardware you use to create your custom interfaces, like being able to control a virtual experience by tugging on a rope or by rowing in a boat. I know obviously that's all custom built, so what things did you use to create those?
Different things. Let's have a look. I can't remember. Hang on. It's the slide I skipped. Not that one. It's not that one. This one had a fancy one. Unskip slide. Oh yeah. What does it say?
It's not coming from the screen.
Oh, it's not because I need to play it. There we go. Okay. So this one for In Search of Abandoned. So you're controlling a kind of Zeppelin yacht wheel. So that was like a 1930s yacht wheel I got off eBay. And then I think there's a rotary encoder, and then it's attached to an Arduino, and then there's some custom software which is taking the impulses from that as a control input to the system. But because this project was done with with a cave, it's using specific software called Vizard, which is made by a company called WorldViz that do cave software, and this is like a 2-screen cave. And I guess some people are not familiar with what a cave is, but basically it's a virtual reality system where you have basically a box. One way of doing it is you have a box, and all the boxes projected on from the back, and you go in the middle, and you wear stereo glasses. And this is why the video you saw with the kind of wireframe landscape, why there were like 2 images, because it's stereo, and so you have like shutter glasses. And then it's a really nice way of having virtual reality instead of a headset, because you can have other people in there as well, and they can wear the glasses too, and they can see what you're seeing, and you can see each other, and it kind of feels very naturalistic. But the really nice thing that you don't see in the video is that you can't see the corners. So this interface, so there's a couple of ropes as well, and we needed to get tension onto these ropes, and we had we used a thing, there's like a thing you can use for spraying paint, which is like a hydraulic piston, and the rope's attached to that, and then we had
we had the
stretch sensor.
Yeah.
Some kind of stretch sensor, yeah.
It was really sort of Heath Robinson. So
But it worked.
You know the shutters that you have. We don't have them in the UK because we don't really have mosquitoes yet. But you have like a
Screen door closers.
On the door closes, and it closes like this. Well, we used some of those mechanisms.
But they're too weak.
But they weren't strong enough, yeah.
But this is the interface of White Island, and so it's got hemp rope, and hemp rope is attached to 2 like trampoline springs, like the heaviest gauge trampoline springs. So it's really, really, really tight, because this piece was was shown for ages and ages for months, and we knew that people were literally going to be kids going to be hanging off it. So it had to support a human being's body weight. And then at the top we made a custom interface again, and it was using like an Arduino, and it had like some kind of sonar sensor. So it's like it just measures the distance, and it had some kind of very high sensitivity, really kind of expensive. It's like a $50 component, right? It's the most expensive thing. Accelerometer, so it can measure left and right movement, and then the springs were already stretched, so you could pull it down, and you'd increase the distance to the ceiling, and then if you pulled it up, you'd decrease the distance, and it was only moving like a couple of inches, but basically it was sensitive enough to measure that. And then we're taking those kind of analog values, and then we're just basically, I think the Arduino is just basically acting as a keyboard, and so effectively it's like the computer's getting key presses into the computer game engine. But we've done other stuff where we've used, and as well it has these fans, so.
Yeah.
So the fan, so the balloon is being blown around by the wind, unlike a normal kind of hot air balloon. Andre's balloon had sails. He was the most technologically advanced balloon in the world in 1897. And so the wind is blowing the balloon, and you, by tugging on the rope, you're changing this direction of the sails. And so what was happening was the wind direction is coming out of the computer game engine, and then it's going into processing, and the processing was turning it into it's getting hooked up to an Arduino, and the Arduino is running a bunch of relays, so it gets stepped up, and then the wind and the relays are powering these fans, and so the fans are basically blowing, the virtual wind is physicalized by the array of fans, so the wind can go all around you, and so as you, when the wind changes direction, the wind's suddenly blowing in your front, and then gradually the balloon, it turns to face away from the wind, and so the fans kind of slowly go back to behind you again. And so it's basically, the method is like whatever we can get to work, basically. But there's like, you can do a lot of keyboardy hacks and things like that. Yeah.
I'll ask a question. Will you tell us a little bit about your partnership and whether your roles are pretty similar from project to project or whether you're always trading off?
We actually collaborate with a lot of other people as well, and more recently with other choreographers, which has been really exciting. As we work together, yeah, I don't know. Sometimes our roles switch, depending on what project. But obviously, which is unfortunate, probably, but obviously Bruno is a lot more technical than I am, as you can gather. But I guess what's interesting is that some of the dance knowledge, embodied knowledge that I have, goes into these systems. So it's very interesting that there's no stopping or starting. There's pausing, there's accelerating, there's ascending and descending, which is very different, So sometimes the controls are not expected to work in the way that they would normally do immediately, for example. So all those things go. So we to and fro, the information and the skill sets go across, and the information. So, have you got anything to say about that? He's a really good dancer. Sorry. As well. So, and
which I'll demonstrate later.
And understands dance. And he changed the first video that we showed today. But actually, Bruno's really good. Because he understands and his cleaned so much motion capture material, he can anticipate where the body is going to go. So, as a kind of steady cam guy, cameraman, when he's filming dancers or groups of dancers, he can actually, in Central Otago, he'd have a t-shirt, because it's so hot, a t-shirt, and then the camera under the t-shirt, he can move it with us in and around us. And I think it really speaks to the VR work, because when you go inside, as some of you will do, when you actually enter some of the worlds that we create, if there's the movement sensibility that is in there is amazing because of that. Because of working with that so much. And then one of the guys who helped us with the interface with the oars for the Vermilion Lake project, he ended up making a really successful indie underwater game, Depth. So, the people that we collaborate with we all end up swapping skills. I really, really recommend collaborating. It's really, it frees you up.
Any more questions?
Do you have anything currently shown in the U.S.?
No. I think so. I think we've got
China.
we've got something. Yeah, we've got a couple of things in China, I think, right now, and I think the next show we've got coming up is at Art House 1, isn't it? We're showing some VR stuff. Art House 1. We have to finish that piece. Yeah.
We haven't. When was the last time we showed you?
I don't know.
A couple of years.
Yeah.
If there are no more questions, then please join me in thanking our guests and head on over to the Genesis Lab.
Thank you.
Do you ever find your visions conflict, and if they do, how do you manage that?
Oh yeah, all the time.
All the time.
Yeah, but that's why it's good. That's why it's good to collaborate with people. Otherwise, you just get too in your bubble.
And definitely opposite. It's interesting.
Yeah, but
it's a really good question.
Yeah, but it's also, it's like, sometimes it's really good to just totally swap roles and just, and you know, because otherwise you're just doing the same thing that you've got like you might have your preferred way of working, and you really like this particular medium, and you really like this particular way of doing stuff, and you like, so everything you're going to do is just going to be the same forever, basically. It's just going to be a version of that. Whereas if somebody else says, no, this sucks, and then they say you should do this and that, and you like, I hate that idea, but then you try it anyway, then you might get to somewhere quite new. And so often we'll, you know, and when we collaborate with our installation team, like doing pieces like Vermilion Lake, it's a big, laborious, complicated install. I mean, when we go to the gallery together, we don't try and have the you know, sort of it's not this sort of massive ego of the artist where our installation technicians have to do exactly what we say. We just say, okay, we've got to install this thing. The installation technicians we've got are very, very smart, and we've worked with them a lot, and we figure out, and so we will always take suggestions from like everybody in our team about how we're going to do something, because very often other people, they haven't got all the baggage, you know what I mean? Because I might be really stuck, I'm like, I really want this wall to be painted blue or something, and they're like, no, it's just, you know.
And you know,
you just have to listen, because
there's always someone who knows something more than you do.
Yeah, most people, yeah.
You know, always. So, like, I mean, music particularly as well, you know. And Bruno's right, wherever we go, we always make a maquette of the gallery space. And sometimes of the models, so that we can, if we're in a country which is not our native tongue, we can like actually put the model on the floor and move it around, and that's really good. But the thing you said first was whether you agree or not, kind of thing, or have the same vision. If you don't agree, it's sometimes quite interesting, because when you know it's right, you kind of know it's right. You know, it's like, I don't know where that comes from. So that happens to us quite a lot, where it'll just feel like, that's right, you know? I don't know. I think you like what you like, even though the process might be very different or painful or whatever. But actually, I think we're all, you know, it's like the taste or those things. I think we know. Interesting. Thank you. Which piece of work? Never had that question.
I don't know, I think
it's weird because it will be maybe different tomorrow.
yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Normally what happens is though,
I think so. It's kind of, yeah, they're all different.
once you make something, right, what normally, the process we go through, you make it, and they have this big pain in the ass because you install the damn thing, and you maybe like it for like a minute, and then you're like, Jesus Christ, it's over, it's amazing, it's done. And then you're like, great, and then you just hate it, and you never want to think about it ever again, and then about 4 years later, you'd be like, oh, you know, that was actually really good. And you can actually accept it. And there's always this kind of, you need to have like distance. Yeah, and it's
like the black and white project. I mean,
Yeah.
the black and white project's been running forever, and people really love it, and it's won awards, and it's gone around the world, and there's thousands of people, but we're like, go away. We just want to move on. So.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's really good to have distance. And they do this weird thing in the UK with some galleries are publicly funded, so they get money from the government or whatever, and they're really concerned with evaluation, and specifically things like having visitor numbers. And sometimes they do these weird things where they just kind of have like questionnaires when people leave. And I think this is like the stupidest. Yeah, they go, would you like to fill out a survey? Could we ask you questions about what you thought? And I think this is like, it's really bad to think about what you've just done, because you've got no critical distance. And the thing hasn't been allowed to even exist for any kind of amount of time. You know, and
imagine if you had to do that after you went to see the cinema. After you saw Blockbuster or whatever, you had Right. Marks out of 10, yeah.
Yeah, it's just, yeah, and it's just, because you get like, I think you get really bad, it's kind of, it's just a bad way to do something, I think. Yeah, I don't know. So I don't know what my favourite piece is. I think my favourite piece is probably...
Out of those or out of those?
I think the Vermilion Lake one, which is the kind of cabin, I think that was really good. And we showed that. The really nice thing was that we did it went around to all these places, and we had this tour lined up, but we didn't have any money for this tour, and we got stuck where we had this big gap in the middle of showing it, where we didn't have it, we had to store it before it went to the next. It didn't go from gallery to gallery. There's a big gap in the middle, and luckily our friends had this massive gallery in this old warehouse, this massive factory, and we managed to. They came around to our house and we got them really drunk, and then we said, "Can we do a show at your place?" And they were like, "Yes." And we're like, "Fantastic! We're going to store, store the art in the gallery as a show." And we did this great show in their gallery, and it was because the house is all like grey and monochromatic because it's like a quotation of a house. Their gallery, it was like literally an old, like a bus garage. So it wasn't like a white cube space. It was like a grotty, massive thing, and it just looked absolutely fantastic. And it was so good. And I was like, this is absolutely the best. And we could not have, because it wasn't part of the original plan. No. And I think that was the best ever show ever that we did, was that piece in that gallery.
And it was a good team.
Yeah, it was a good team.
Because the house wasn't fixed. So
yeah, we had to saw a bit off to fit it in. There's like a beam, we had to saw a bit off.
So we'd all move it.
Yeah.
We'd be inside it and move it. It's like a set, basically. We're very lucky. That whole series is very lucky, because what you don't know about that is the backstory. Because we went to the set of the assassination of Jesse James, which is in Cochrane, in Calgary, in Canada. So it's really weird. We sort of go and shoot all this stuff and do this stuff way before like Revenant and so on and so on. But we went to the house of our friend's owned a farm where that house from the assassination of Jesse James is filmed.
So they had the set of Jesse James's house and all the other things.
So we were really inspired by that. Yeah. So it was just all happened like that.
So Jesse James's house is a 360-degree set, which is perfect in every detail, down to the hinges and the handle and glass, and everywhere you look at it, you can shoot anywhere, and it's perfectly like a proper period house in every way. And then you look out, you go on the porch, look down the thing, there's a whole village, and you go, there's a whole town down there, and it's all like physically there. It's like time travel. But then you walked. But but the thing that interests me most is that when you walk around the side and you see that the fact that the set just goes whoomp and it's just like plywood at the back. There's this kind of you go from believing it to it's an illusion, and then if you stand in the middle, you can see both at the same time, and it's where the kind of difference between the illusion and the real is kind of like is kind of this halfway blend. Is the point that we're trying to get to.
Sorry to interrupt, but there's more fun to come in the Genesis Lab, so please thank them again with me.
You have to go and plug a thing in.